I got knocked down.
Anthony jumped back up and looked out the window. What he saw horrified him.
Some people, debris falling, a lot of ashes, a lot of fire, a lot of smoke. That was so scary. That's when I started, panicking.
Everyone on the 81st floor ran for the emergency exit and started down the stairs. At first, they made steady progress.
We're on the 50th floor, the 40th floor, the 30th floor. But as we're going down, we're seeing firemen resting. The sweat is dripping off their face, and they're carrying oxygen tanks. And you start to think, are you going to make it?
Just a few blocks north, Phil's girlfriend, Helen Orloff, was at work, watching TV and wondering the same thing.
I became hysterical, and I tried to call him, and I couldn't get him, obviously. He kept saying that my heart is in that building.
Phil finally made it to the lobby of Tower 1. He was just about free of the building. But then...
What's the other jet doing? Holy f***.
Dad! Oh, my God!
That's when the second plane hit Tower 2.
All over.
Lights went out. 3 cops jumped on top of me. One guy gave me his helmet, and I covered my face, and they just said, remain calm.
They were in darkness, the air thick with smoke and dust.
And the cop said, let's get out of here, and he started feeling his way around. Once we saw that bit of light, I don't think anything would have stopped us. I walked out, it was literally a war zone. There was ashes all over.
Right.
There was small balls of fire. There was concrete, glass as far as you can see.
Everywhere.
As far as you can see.
Anthony came out a few seconds later. Again, everyone seemed to be safe. But then...
Oh, no! Oh, no!
Maybe 15 seconds after I walked out, that's when the second tower came down.
And I just turned around.
That's exactly what I did.
And you could actually see it come down. They kept telling us, go north, keep going north, don't look back.
That's when I ran, and if I hold my hand in front of my face, I would not be able to see it. Come to the light! It was so horrible.
I got 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and the first building went down.
News photographer Don Hallisey was covering the disaster for the New York Post.
Of course, everybody's running away from it, and I'm a press photographer. I'm running to it.
Hallisey ran towards the wreckage of Tower 2 and started shooting photos, getting closer and closer to ground zero.
And then we heard like this growing, rumbling, and it sounded like an avalanche.
It was Tower 1 coming down.
It was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building.
You were picked up off the ground.
Physically picked up off the ground. And I'd say like I was about from here to the end of the partition here.
Yeah.
And I'm screaming, anybody out there? Anybody alive? And my voice was the only voice out there.
How did you get out of this?
Well, I started walking around like in very short steps because I didn't want to trip over anything. And as I said, after about 20 minutes or so, it started to settle and the sun came out. It was like the weirdest thing.
By this time, Phil and Anthony had finally run far enough to be out of harm's way.
And then I finally collapsed, and the EMS was so good. You know, they treated everybody. They just said, sit here. They gave me oxygen.
I kept getting phone calls at my desk, and I got this message, and you keep deleting, because and all you kept praying is, come on, God, let me hear his voice, come on. And then I got, Helen, it's me, the building fell down on me. I'm sorry, don't be mad, I love you, I'm on my way home.
I couldn't see anything.
And my whole department started to cheer.
Look at it now. It's like nothing was there. Think how many bodies are still there.
But as for Don Hallisey, he's left with anger.
I've never had this kind of hate before. Never. Those son of a bitches. I was saying there better be a hole in the ground somewhere. Because if Bush doesn't do something about this, I mean, this is not terrorism. This is an act of war.
Harold Dow's report. We're going to be talking about some of the economic aspects to this current situation in a few moments. But first, let me remind us all that events of the last few days have already changed so much for so many. Life as we know it may never be quite the same. With that thought in mind, here's Bill Lagatuda.
As Americans went about their business today, took their kids back to school, resumed their routines, there was an almost universal refrain. First, defiance. We will not let terrorists dictate how we lead our lives.
If that happens, they've won. I'm not going to leave New York. I'm not going to run.
Then, reality. Some things will have to change.
Do you think that things are different from this moment on?
I definitely think things are different from this moment on.
Definitely be more aware of my surroundings and individuals that are around me.
December 7th, 1941.
This is not the first time horrible events have changed our society. Pearl Harbor showed us how suddenly an enemy can strike. In the early 60s, we learned our leaders could be taken. In the 70s and 80s, that our jetliners could be hijacked. In the 90s, that terror can come from within. Then, this week. Do you think that this is a moment that has changed everything?
No, I think absolutely.
Dr. Harold Koplowitz is a New York City psychiatrist.
I think there are certain moments in history that make us think differently. I think that Pearl Harbor did that. I think the Holocaust did that. And this kind of evil does that to us also.
If, from this week forward, our way of thinking, our mindset has changed forever, if this was a watershed event, then how do we begin to prepare the next generation of Americans, our children, to live in a different, perhaps much less carefree world?
Just seeing so much smoke and so much flames and these people jumping out of the Twin Towers was, I think, one of the most horrifying things that I saw all day.
15-year-old Jane Sussman was at school just 4 blocks from the World Trade Center when it was attacked on Tuesday.
Do you think that you've changed forever, having seen what you've seen?
How could I not? It was awful. I don't think, as a person viewing America, viewing other countries, I'll ever be the same.
That concerns her mother, Ruth, a criminal court judge.
I hope that the kids can get back to, having fun and just having the carefree, innocent existence that they should have at this point.
Parents just have to bring the topic up. They have to discuss it somewhat, and maybe it's in a small little bite-sized piece, maybe it's a longer conversation, but the kids have to know there's a safe place for them to discuss and get honest, true answers.
For the future, will a show of guns on the streets be the norm? How much security will we tolerate? Jeffrey Lesoff, a lawyer.
I'm sure we're going to have to give up maybe certain of our rights just to make sure that we're safe.
Susie Whiting is a mother of 7 from Utah.
When they told us today that we needed to be at the airport tomorrow 3 hours early so that they could do a security, a more intense security check, we were more than happy to say, you go for it.
So far, there's been a surge in patriotism. Military recruiting stations are seeing people walking in and saying, sign me up. Men like Dennis Martinez.
It's emotional just to think that it happened here. To see those firefighters go down like that. Nah. I want to go.
And Herbert Jones just wants a piece of the enemy, whoever that turns out to be.
Vietnam, I didn't feel was my fight or the Gulf War, but when they come to New York City, then it's everybody's fight. And once it hits home, I think every man, woman, and child should be armed and ready.
And then there is Zdenka Kalbo, one of the newest Americans, a citizen for only 5 months.
Do you worry that things are changing in this country?
No, I love this country and I will love it forever. No.
Some people may be afraid of being at America's landmarks, like the Empire State Building. She is not.
We still came today, and we wanted to go on the top of Empire State Building, to see the only one what we have left. We have no fear from that.
Bill Lagatuda's report. Dateline Washington, White House and congressional bargainers, as expected, have now agreed to $40 billion as a sort of opening payment for anti-terrorism, and part of that to help rebuild New York. The major U.S. stock markets closed most of the week, will be closed again tomorrow. They will be up and trading again Monday. Everybody connected with the markets assures us. CBS News business correspondent Anthony Mason has been reporting on the economic impact of the terror attacks. Anthony?
Dan, the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ say they intend to conduct a complete test of their trading systems on Saturday. If there are no significant problems, they intend to reopen the markets on Monday at 9:30 a.m. For the bond and futures markets, well, they went back to business today, but it was not business as usual.
On the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, traders tentatively returned to work Thursday.
It was just, I don't know, kind of like going into a dark room and then turning the lights on and looking and seeing what was there.
But there was no panic, and at exactly 11 o'clock, trading calmly came to a stop for a moment of silence. The exchange closed early, but trader Jeff Carter said,
"It was good for us to open today. I think it's a good sign for the rest of the world that, yeah, we can do it. Pretty soon Wall Street's going to be there for them."
After 4 dark days, the markets, said New York Stock Exchange Chairman Dick Grasso, will reopen Monday.
As to our facilities, neither the marketplace itself nor our technology centers, which are split, sustained any damage.
But economists say there could have been damage to the economy if the Federal Reserve Bank had not been aggressive during this crisis.
Just the fact that the lender of last resort is there tends to calm a lot of nerves and make these things turn out to be not as bad as they might be.
Soon after the attack, the Fed made billions of dollars available to banks. So if there was a run on cash by businesses or account holders, the banks would have the money. The Fed's done that before, after the 1987 stock market crash, for example.
What is a little different this time is the speed and the size of the effort and the fact that it's being coordinated on a global basis.
Many foreign banks also had offices in and around the World Trade Center. The Fed has offered help to them, too.
Essentially what the Fed has said is that the financial institutions have a blank check.
And in a crisis like this, that is absolutely critical to maintaining confidence and keeping the economy going. And Dan, most analysts expect that within a week, perhaps as early as Monday, the Fed will follow that up, probably with another rate cut, perhaps even half a point, just to tell investors, to tell consumers, it's okay.
Now, we were told for some time the markets definitely would reopen on Monday. I note the latest information is, well, they're going to have a tryout, going to have a practice Saturday, and now we're told if that practice goes well, they'll reopen on Monday.
Well, I think they're telling us they're going to open Monday. That's the plan. I think the reality is if they conduct a test on Saturday and they've got major problems, they're going to have to reevaluate everything. Their intention is we're opening Monday.
You know, we've tried very hard to keep our focus on the human part of this story and make it clear that the point of this story, up to and including now and certainly through tomorrow's day of prayer and remembrance, is on the families of the victims and the search for whomever, if anybody, may still be alive in the debris. We want to talk a little bit now with Anthony Mason and with Tom Calandra from CBS Market Watch about what's happening and may happen with the economics of the country. Tom, thanks for being with us. Tom Calandra writes a column for MarketWatch.com, writes a daily internet column about U.S. investment trends, helps run the whole Market Watch operation. Tom, what's your read on this? Is it inevitable now that the U.S. economy will go into at least a short recession?
I think, Dan, that you really have to look at what had been happening before the attack. There was very, very little good news on the economic front. I mean, we had the slowest growth probably in 8 years. The economy grew 0.2% in the second quarter. We have manufacturing declining. We have inventories building up. And to have this at a time seems almost too unreal. So I think on the economic front, you have a hope that the U.S. can get out of this, but consumer sentiment, as we saw today, hit a new 8-year low, and you just have to hope that there's a recovery down the road, probably 3 or 6 months.
What about the theory that goes along these lines? Well, yes, South Florida went into something approaching recession after Hurricane Andrew and the $15 billion plus loss in that one region. But because of insurance payments and federal help and so much investment for reconstruction, it not only came back, but it came booming back pretty quickly.
Dan, we have several people now, economists, starting to talk about what I call the Schwarzenegger effect. Nobody wants to say that there's going to be a war or a military action, but you only have to look at the London Stock Exchange, for example, today. BAE Systems, a defense contractor and one of the largest in the world, certainly in the UK, was up 13% in share price, and a number of other defense contractors have been up sharply. So I think your question is well put. It applies certainly to the defense industry, and certainly with this liquidity that the Fed is providing and other central banks that Anthony Mason pointed out, we will see probably in the short term a pretty stable stock market. I think, though, the investors will be reluctant to buy anything but things like defense contractors.
Anthony Mason, he raises a good point that, look, in wartime, certain people make a lot of money. Now, military, people who produce military products up, 13%, this one outfit on the London market. Construction, be need for a lot of equipment, everything from bulldozers to concrete, once the rebuilding process really starts here.
Well, Tom alluded to it, and there are a number of economists who are now starting to postulate that all of this additional government spending on defense, construction spending, all of that could end up providing an awful lot of fuel for this economy, and that maybe it could pull us out of a recession, which even some of them suggest is inevitable. It could pull us out of a recession pretty quickly.
Tom Granda, what did we learn as we went through the Gulf War at the end of the 1980s, start of the 1990s? The Gulf War was widely believed to have touched off a recession.
You know what, though, Dan? When you look at the invasion of Kuwait and then the U.S. reaction that January, I think it was January of '91, the Persian Gulf conflict interrupted what was the beginning of a bull market. And I remember sitting at my desk, I was working at the San Francisco Examiner at the time. You couldn't find anyone on Wall Street or anywhere in the country who thought the stock market was going to go up when the U.S. became involved that January. And sure enough, not only did the market go up, but it was up about 30% in the ensuing months after the U.S. activity. Here we have something a little bit different. We've had 18 months of a bear market. We've had the beginnings of a very serious economic slowdown. And for this to happen at the same time is very, very serious. And I think that most investors are hoping and praying that the stock market goes the same way the bond market went today, which is up. But you have to remember, in the long term, not 7 interest rate cuts, not any amount of liquidity will help the stock market unless the economy bounces back over the long term.
Anthony?
Tom, what do you think the impact of a 4-day delay in opening the stock market is? I mean, do you think some people have suggested to me that it's gonna mitigate the shock, or do you think it's just gonna? Do you think we're gonna have a little bit of a shock on Monday and then prices will drift down?
I'll tell you something, Anthony. I don't think we're going to see a shock at all on Monday. I think this is a wait-and-see market. Never in my 20 years as a financial journalist, as a reporter, have I seen investors, economists, strategists, and money managers so split on which way the stock market is going to go on Monday. And I know that the world markets feel the same way. For example, this evening in Japan and in Taiwan, the markets are relatively unchanged. Yes, Tokyo and Hong Kong did have sharp falls earlier in the week, but right now you're seeing a world equity market that's looking for the U.S. for direction, and not to have had it for 4 days is very frustrating. I think that because of the liquidity that the Fed's providing to the financial system, and because most investors are used to 18 months of falling market right now, this could be a short-term opportunity to buy stocks, not to sell them.
Tom Granda, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Dan and Anthony.
There were some signs today that the financial world was regaining its footing, the bond market opened, and investors began looking to the future. But for some firms like Cantor Fitzgerald, a major player in bonds, the human suffering was still overwhelming. The company had 4 of the top floors in the first tower that was hit, 1,000 employees. Only 300 survived. Leslie Stahl spoke this afternoon with the chairman.
Howard Lutnick would normally have been at his desk when the plane hit. But on Tuesday morning, he was taking his 5-year-old son to his first day of kindergarten. Most of Lutnick's employees at the World Trade Center are missing, including his own brother, Gary.
I'm missing 700 families, 700 people, 700 people.
You're missing more than 2/3 of your company.
700 people. And it's worse because I don't know of any, not a single person who got down from the building, not a one. And that is just the most brutal statistic, and I'm the one who has to tell everybody. And I tell it to them, and I tell it to them, and I tell it to them. And
yesterday, you set up a center for the families in a hotel here in New York. What did you say? What happened in that room?
They're all looking for answers, and they look, as if somehow I can know the answers for them.
You're the company that when you ask, was anybody completely wiped out? You're the name. Cantor Fitzgerald. The company. What happens to the company now?
Our business is the bond exchange of the world. And
you may have had the largest stake in American Treasury bonds.
We're the market that all the banks and dealers and all the big names they go to buy and sell their bonds. And last year we did $50 trillion in business.
So the bond market opened. How does it open without you?
I got my people together. There are 275 people who survived in New York. We have 1,000 people in London. And we got them together, and I asked them what they wanted to do. That this is what the Treasury wanted to do, and this is what the Fed wanted, and the Treasury said it would be important for America to reopen.
So you're opened. Your company is operating.
At 7 a.m. this morning, I had 260 people. They never slept. I don't know why they did it. I don't know why. They voted that they wanted to open the market, and they stayed up all night. And they worked every second of every minute. So instead of worrying about the person to the left and the person to the right, at 7 a.m. New York time, they opened the bond markets of the world because they wanted to.
Like so many other Wall Street firms forced out of their headquarters, Cantor Fitzgerald survivors are working in a temporary operations center. Theirs is in New Jersey.
Is there any sense in your mind and their minds that this is a way to fight back? I mean, to say, you didn't cripple us, you didn't destroy us, we're not going to let you succeed?
I think there's a little of everything. I think everybody's different. I think some people want to don't let them get away with it. And some people said, I cannot be at home. I cannot be at home. Other people said, I can't think about it. So I think it's everything. I think it's amazing human spirit.
Cantor Fitzgerald's people helped make today's trading orderly, almost ordinary. William Donaldson, former chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, watched the day unfold.
The bond market today, apparently there was a lot of volatility, but at the end of the day, things settled. Do you take this as a positive sign, a negative sign, a sign of hesitancy, a sign of lack of confidence?
I think it's a natural sign. I think as I think back onto other crises we've had, I think it's quite natural when there's uncertainty, there's a flight to certainty, which short-term government bonds represent, short-term securities.
The head of NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange announced that the stock markets would remain closed tomorrow for an unprecedented 4th day in a row.
To resume trading 9:30 Monday morning.
But even a Monday opening is iffy. There are questions about whether the downtown area will be safe enough by then. Not only are some buildings still in danger of collapse, but there have been bomb scares around the city. And the markets themselves are still rebuilding their computer systems.
From just a technical point of view, a need to make sure that once the infrastructure of the marketplace is open, that it works. because nothing could be worse than to open it prematurely and have some sort of system or power failure.
On Saturday, NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange will conduct a full-scale computer stress test. Only if the system works will the Monday opening go forward.
If the market's open, what do you think is going to happen? In past crises, people pull their money out.
If we follow past patterns, again, I refer to Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth, there's been a precipitous decline and then a reversal.
At least on the Internet, there's already a backlash against the conventional wisdom that Monday will see a big sell-off. Stock market chat rooms today were filled with gung-ho, bullish cheerleading. Please don't sell. If you sell, bin Laden will buy American shares. Invest in America. Even if the markets do open down on Monday, as expected, the mere fact that they're open will be seen by many as a victory.
The major firms of the world, the biggest banks and dealers, they all have issues. Downtown Manhattan is not a place where people are going, and it's not business as usual. The big banks, they all have issues. They're in the disaster sites. So I think Bank of New York lost its main site and its disaster site, so it's in number 3. So, I mean, these are not the kind of business conditions where people are going to go out and try to do a lot of business. What they're there to do is to show that the American financial system is bigger than anything that anybody else can dish at it, and that the collective group of all the banks and dealers and firms like ours of the world can pull together, and they will make it work.
So many people in the investment community are anxious to send out reassuring signals that the system is sturdy and resilient. And yet, the whiff of pessimism about the economy is in the air, a fear about a ripple effect. There's no question that whole sectors of the economy are already affected, like the airline business and tourism. But mainly there's concern about consumer confidence, which has been the one bright light in the U.S. economy. A fear that people are less likely to go to the mall, for instance, certainly this weekend. Most analysts feel there is bound to be a psychological hit. So the question becomes, what is the half-life of fear? 2 weeks? 6 months? Nobody knows. Dan?
Leslie Stahl, thank you. As we've been trying to do right along, we try to bring you up to date on late developments at the half-hour mark, roughly, and then at the top of every hour. So it's time for me to say again, Dan Rather at CBS News World Headquarters in New York, and this is continuing CBS News coverage of the attack on America. And here are some of the latest headlines. The White House and the congressional leadership agreed late tonight, actually early Friday morning in Washington, on details of a now $40 billion package to fight terrorism and pay for recovery from the terror attacks on New York and the Pentagon. The confirmed death toll is approaching 500. That includes at least 266 on the 4 crashed airplanes, includes 126 at the Pentagon, and a confirmed 94 dead in New York. But nearly 5,000 people are reported missing in and around the shattered World Trade Center. A flight recorder has been recovered now from the plane that crashed near Pittsburgh, and searchers are tracking what they say are signals from another flight data recorder in the rubble at the Pentagon. U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell has named right out Osama bin Laden as, quote, the prime suspect in the attacks. U.S. Defense Department officials planning retaliation are now asking the president to okay calling up to 30,000 to 50,000 reservists. The United States wants Pakistan to close its border with Afghanistan and to permit U.S. military flights over its territory. Airline service in this country is slowly resuming, but foreign carriers are still banned from U.S. airspace in most cases. And President Bush is preparing to visit the disaster scene in New York City tomorrow. He is designated, well, actually today now, Eastern Time, on Friday, and the president has designated Friday as a national day of prayer and remembrance. When terror struck this week, thousands of Americans were stranded in transit. John Blackstone now with the story of how some are beginning to get where they were going in the first place.
As they waited in Honolulu, a stranded hula group could at least keep other marooned passengers entertained. At airports across the country, countless would-be travelers have the same goal, to be someplace else.
All they want to do is get out of San Francisco. You know, they don't care how they get out of San Francisco.
But as the aviation system creaked back into business today, there was plenty of confusion. An Italian airliner cleared to San Francisco was turned around twice before finally being allowed to land.
They told us that it was an administrative misunderstanding.
Uncertainties in airline schedules are expected to stretch well into next week.
Has it been damaging? It's been incredibly damaging.
Aviation consultant Michael Boyd says for many, air travel may never be the same.
Nothing. What we're going to find is a propensity not to travel, and that's going to really hurt whole sections of our economy.
With some 40,000 flights a day canceled, the shutdown could cost the airline industry internationally as much as $10 billion. And the losses don't stop with the airlines.
Between mail not getting through, between passengers not getting through, between important documents not getting through, air cargo not getting through, factories having to close, it's significant.
With planes grounded, the post office and other express carriers have been loading most of their shipments on trucks.
And then when you get at the southern end of St. Louis, you want 44 all the way.
In fact, across the country, Americans have been rediscovering the highways. For air travelers in Chicago with other places to go,
anyone here going to Philadelphia?
Kansas City.
Buffalo.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Long Island, New York. Philly.
The rental agents at Avis became matchmakers of sorts.
Boston or Seattle? Anybody going to? Oh, yeah. You, come with me.
Joe Rudolph suddenly found a traveling companion.
Hi, how you doing?
So you two are going to drive together. You've never met.
Never met. I'm Terry.
I'm Joe.
Joe, nice to meet you.
For a 2,000-mile trip to Seattle.
Yeah, we were separated at birth.
Okay, is my crew ready here?
And the kindness of a stranger may get Diane Sawicki and her colleagues home.
We know each other, but we're going with another gentleman that we don't know to Cleveland, so we'll see what happens.
Well, I'm going to drop them in Cleveland on their way back to Buffalo.
James Daly has decided this won't be an inconvenience, but an adventure.
I've tried Amtrak, I've tried the Greyhound stations. You can't get through to any of them, so we're going to try the old great American way, hitting the road.
One group of travelers launched on a cross-country journey by this tragedy made it to St. Louis today. Sherry, Jeanette, Jerry, Ned, and Doug worked together at a foundation in San Francisco.
Well, we're about a third of the way across the country so far.
They were at a meeting in Washington, D.C. when the terrorists struck and they couldn't fly home.
You know, it felt really good to get out of D.C. Started hitting some countryside, those rolling green hills.
I think part of the reason we got in the van to go was we just couldn't take sitting there and feeling like, you know, we weren't in control in some way of what was happening to us and maybe, you know, to our country as well.
I think it's reassuring. As we drive and look at the scenery, I start thinking about how we've taken our freedom for granted. I mean, something like this happens, and all of a sudden it changes life as we knew it.
To be free enough to do that, to be free enough to get in our own vehicle and to head out, despite all of the tragedy and all of the uncertainty and all of the concerns about security, we're still free enough in this country to do this. Every state we come to, Ned knows the state song.
So what is the state song for Illinois?
1818 saw your founding, Illinois.
At other times.
John Blackstone, reporting from the West Coast. Well, a possible significant breakthrough in the story of the attacks on Tuesday. A man who tried to use a fake pilot's identification to get past security at John F. Kennedy International Airport has been arrested, and 5 other people have been detained at city airports by the FBI and Joint Terrorist Task Force. The incident about this man who used a fake pilot's identification to get past security caused the 3 major New York airports to close again Thursday shortly after they'd opened. The airports remained closed as we went into the early hours of Friday. Now, a source quoted by the Associated Press as being, quote, knowledgeable of the workings of the airline industry said the man was arrested at Kennedy Airport, That man was checked in sometime between noon and 4 p.m. today. The man was trying to board American Airlines Flight 299 bound for San Jose, California. The man had been scheduled for an earlier flight on Tuesday bound for Los Angeles. Now, we reported this incident before this evening. But that flight, the one on Tuesday, which was due to take off around 9 o'clock in the morning, New York time, the flight was canceled after the terrorist attack began on the World Trade Center. Now, a subsequent strip search of this man is said to have found a pilot certificate from a Florida school. Now, Anthony, you have some other information on this?
There's just a couple of other details here. I mean, there's several reports on this incident, Dan. This is the New York Times interviewed another passenger, Mike Glass, 43 of Seattle, who was also searched. He described how the officers scrutinized the identifications of all the passengers, and this is a quote from this one passenger: "Anyone with dark skin or who spoke with an accent was taken aside and searched, and then they went to any male with too much facial hair, which included me." As I said, that's Mike Glass of Seattle describing the search that ultimately led them to pull this man aside. The police commissioner of New York was quoted this evening as saying he has no idea whether the man arrested or those detained were connected to the terrorist attacks on Tuesday.
But certainly one could understand why the FBI is very interested in a man who has an altercation on the plane, if the reports are correct, an alleged altercation on the plane
That's a separate incident we're talking about, Dan, that occurred on Tuesday on a flight that was scheduled to go to Los Angeles, but was canceled because of the attacks on the World Trade Center. It was roughly the same time, 9 a.m. 3 males on that flight, United Airlines Flight 23 bound for Los Angeles, refused to get off the plane. There was then an argument in which a member of the flight crew became so heated with a member of the flight crew that became so heated he called security. By the time security got there, the 3 men had disappeared. The FBI, according to the Associated Press, is now investigating this incident to see whether it may have been an aborted hijacking.
Well, one can see why the FBI and other law enforcement agencies they'll be busy for a long while trying to sort out all of these things. And mark well, so far as we know, none of the people we've been describing here have been charged with any crime whatsoever. We haven't used any names, but these are interesting situations and give a little insight into how complicated trying to untangle this whole case can be. Now let's shift gears and go to a discussion of some of the military options President Bush could consider to retaliate for the terrorist attacks. And join us for that is retired U.S. Army Colonel Mitch McConnell, a CBS News consultant and our old friend from the Gulf War. Thanks for being with us, Colonel. I want to come back to this business of the reserves being called up. Now, it seems pretty obvious that the Defense Department's requested 30 to 50,000 reservists being called up, probably going to be approved by the President. Is this just the beginning of the call-ups, or is it likely to be this and nothing more?
I think this is the beginning, Dan. Of course, they're mission connected, so when the missions become better defined, then we'll know what reserve units we need to call up. They are the lifeblood of combat operations. They support them. They're mostly logistics people. They set up our airfields. They build things. They get supplies to where they need to be. And we don't fight a war and win a war without our reservists. We never have in the history of this country. So this looks like a serious, serious measure.
Now, NATO passed this resolution to support the United States. Are we not likely to see some NATO troops, even in a token basis, involved in whatever retaliatory measures are eventually taken?
More than a token basis, I would suspect, Dan. You know, we're serious when we say we want to build a coalition against terrorism. We want to give them no place to hide. And the only way we can do that is to get our friends and allies to join us in the effort, and not with just token forces, but with overwhelming force. And when I talk about our friends and allies, I mean also some very strange bedfellows. Muslim countries, we expect those who find these terrible acts of terrorism just unconscionable should be joining us in the fight, because they could be the targets as well.
Colonel, taking all of that into account, a country such as Egypt, the leadership, Hosni Mubarak, would certainly want to sign on to this. On the other hand, he has a very active, very dangerous situation in Egypt in which Muslim fundamentalists of the radical and violent sort seek to overthrow him. And in Saudi Arabia itself, Osama bin Laden wants to overthrow the royal family in Saudi Arabia. As a practical matter, given their political situations, how much can they help?
I think they're going to have to make decisions, Dan. They have these opposition groups. The opposition groups will be going after them no matter what. The question is whether they want to work in concert with a coalition to defeat them or whether they want to work alone. I believe that President Mubarak will come in on our side, and he'll come in very strongly.
Now, the situation with the Iranian-supported terrorists is a highly complicated one. Outline that for us.
Well, the Iranians have done several things. They've given haven to terrorists, and they've also provided that state sponsorship that we've been talking about all along. They provide logistical support, they provide technical support, and they've actually bought weapons to give to terrorist organizations. All of this, now with people saying that the Iranians say that they are not going to be involved in any acts of terrorism against the United States, is suspicious to me. They have to prove themselves over time.
Well, one can understand what used to be the Soviet Union and Russia, and Russian President Putin saying, listen, we're all in to fight terrorism. We'll help you as long as we're talking about Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. But if it broadened out to include Iran, because Iran supports terrorism, Hamas comes to mind, would the Russians be likely to join in?
You know, it depends on what ties the Russians have with Iran. There's more than just a military situation here. There are economic interests as well. And Russia has some economic interest in Iran, and they have some connections. And so if that is more important to them, they may want to back away. But I think we would welcome Russian support anywhere they'd be willing to give it. You know, we don't always get along with them. They were our allies in World War II and some of our most important allies, but we didn't like them very well, and we didn't like their policies. Nevertheless, we'd much rather have them on our side than against us. And I think that's going to be the case now. We'll be glad to have their support.
Mitch Mitchell, retired Colonel, U.S. Army, thanks for helping us.
Thank you, Dan.
Now, from New Yorkers who watched in stunned disbelief as the World Trade Center collapsed before your eyes, to the millions elsewhere who followed the ongoing tragedy on television, the past 3 days have been a national trauma that will require some genuine recovery time for many Americans. CBS's Bill Whitaker has some of their stories tonight. Bill?
Dan, it's important for Americans to get back to normal, to show the world and to show ourselves that we haven't been hobbled. But while the intense desire is there, getting back to normal isn't going to be easy. Just how difficult? Phoenix Airport was one of the first to reopen today with new beefed-up security, which 3 Northwest Airlines employees promptly and deliberately breached. One cleared security without proper ID. The others got through with a knife and corkscrew. A not amused company spokeswoman said for the most part, security worked.
This is a indication of what is being confiscated at the security checkpoints. This was confiscated in a 3-hour period for 2 departing flights.
Recovery's not possible when the shocks keep coming. Pilot Jim Bagley of 29 Palms, California, was stunned by the terror, then stunned again when he learned the Florida flight school where he trained apparently was the training ground for terrorists, too.
There's no doubt in my mind that the air crews were replaced by terrorists who were trained to make this suicide mission.
The FBI has tied the terrorists to several Florida flight schools, including Flight Safety International, where Bagley was certified. Reportedly, some of the suspected terrorists were learning to fly commercial jets there at the same time Bagley was.
But certainly somebody coming out with the commercial level of experience from one of these training programs could very easily navigate that jet after commandeering it and take it back and put it into the World Trade Center.
And when the plane slammed into the World Trade Center, San Francisco businesswoman Melissa Hughes was meeting on the 104th floor of the North Tower. She called her husband of 1 year, Sean, and left this message.
Sean, it's me. I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. A plane hit the building or a bomb went off, we don't know, but there's lots of smoke, and we just wanted you to know that I love you always.
He's called 40 New York hospitals and victim hotlines, but has heard nothing of her since Tuesday morning.
I just wanted to wake up and just somehow just have it not happen, have it be a bad dream.
But this nightmare was real. Wishing not to compound the pain, the fantasy makers of Hollywood are showing restraint.
We do not tolerate attacks on our citizens.
This new Schwarzenegger movie about Colombian terrorists has been shelved for the time being. Even professional sports is stepping up to the plate. Out of respect and solidarity, Major League Baseball has postponed all games through Sunday. So has the NFL, college football, and NASCAR. All to give the nation time to heal. In West Hollywood tonight, coming together for support and unity was a natural part of the healing process. Now, the governors of Oregon, Washington, and California are to lead a minute of silence tomorrow up and down the West Coast, followed by a minute of ringing bells. Dan?
Bill, before you go, what are some of the really significant changes we're going to see in and around airports with this tightened security?
Well, Dan, I think it's fair to say that traveling in and out and through airports is not going to be what we have up until now considered normal. We have just heard just tonight that federal agents, some 800 federal agents from Customs, from INS, and federal marshals are to be placed at 17 major airports around the country tomorrow as a very strong show of security. Dan?
Bill Whitaker in Los Angeles, thanks. A big part of this story concerns the heroic firefighters, those who ran straight toward the scene of a hellish tragedy. Aaron Moriarty has this account about that.
I can see the light. Come to the light. Hello? Anybody in the street? Hello? Anybody?
Those wonderful young firemen, Christian and his colleagues, I know that their first thought was not for themselves, but to save these people, to help these people, to try to save lives.
It was Christian Regenhardt's first big assignment.
He just graduated a few weeks ago. We just had the graduation ceremony. We're all so proud of him.
Stationed at this firehouse in Brooklyn, Christian was one of the first sent to the scene of the World Trade Center.
Would that be like your brother, to go right to ground zero and try to help?
Yeah, he'd want to be on the front lines.
Sally Regenhardt is his mother, Christine, his older sister.
You know, life was not a spectator sport for Christian.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about your brother?
Right now, it's where is he and when will I see him again?
Christian is missing. Shortly after the second tower collapsed, he and 4 of his comrades disappeared in the dust and the smoke.
We're hoping that maybe he's in a hospital, but maybe he's not able to speak. Other people who were termed missing did show up in other hospitals, so that's what we're hoping for.
Just 28 years old, Christian is an athlete and a former Marine. A man, says his mother, who isn't afraid of anything.
He survived typhoons. He survived very dangerous areas.
It was a time when he got caught in a storm and he had to spend 2 nights on the side of a mountain.
Yes, yes. He.
That's why you haven't given up any hope.
Exactly.
But time is dragging on.
The longer we go by without having any word from him, experts, give estimations of how long someone could survive under the rubble, under those conditions. That's the darkest time.
Reports that several firefighters have been found alive in the rubble gives the Regenhardts hope.
We made several attempts to find out who they were. We're still hoping that someone who is connected with Bellevue Hospital can call us and tell us, one way or the other.
Just moments later.
Hello? Yes.
That call comes.
Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. God bless. Bye. They checked the list at Bellevue and Cabrini Hospital. He's not on their lists.
Christian remains on the missing list.
The numbers kept going up about how many firefighters were missing.
Yes,
it was so
we were
hard. It
shocked.
started with
We were
200,
shocked.
and then it went to 250 and 265, and then 300.
Then
and
over 300.
It just, the despair
That's
that you
devastating,
feel. Like,
yes.
It is a despair felt all over this city. To give you some idea of the scope of this disaster, consider this. More than 300 New York firefighters have died in the line of duty in this city since the department was established in 1865. On Tuesday, in one horrific event, nearly that same number may have been lost.
He was exactly where he wanted to be, doing exactly what he wanted to do. There was no other place for him to be.
There's no more waiting for the Fians. Their father, William, was one of the first firemen killed.
Did you know he'd be there?
Yeah, I knew he was there. My one focus when I got there, as chaotic as everything was and everything that had to be done at that point, all I kept asking the guys who were with me is, help me find the command post. So I knew he was gonna, I knew that's where he'd be.
Even though John's dad didn't even have to be there.
In his position as first deputy fire commissioner, he probably didn't have to be there. To be Bill Fee, and he had to be there.
In his 41 years on the force, William Feehan held every rank possible.
I just love it because it just shows everything going wrong around him, and him just being right in the middle, very calm, very cool, and taking care of business, which is what he did.
And if Bill had ever survived this tragedy, the fact that he might have had to bury 200 of his men would have killed him.
They found my father quickly in one piece, and we know what happened to him.
William's
And
daughter,
we also feel
Tara.
worse than this, so we consider ourselves lucky because there's a lot of people out there who are suffering just as much or more than we are because they're waiting, or more than one person in a family, perhaps.
Waiting to hear is probably the worst.
All right, thank you for coming. Thank you. What's your name?
No one knows that better than the Reaganhards.
You know, I'm concerned about my son, and I'm concerned about the other members who are...
Andy Sarah works with Christian in the same firehouse.
All his
we love him
friends.
there. We got to know him. Always got a smile on his face.
Why did you come today? Here.
This is, Christian is one of us. Anything we can do for him, we know. His family needs us right now.
But he doesn't have what Sally Reaganhard really needs. News about her son.
We haven't had any word yet. We're hoping they're in a hospital in Jersey, maybe, or because guys were taken all over the place, wherever they could get them out.
I'm not giving up hope.
He's not a person who ever gave up on anything, and we're not going to give up on him.
I miss him so much.
The last time I spoke to the Reaganhards, there was no news, but still much hope. As we've seen for the past 2 days, there are thousands of people like this hoping for some word about their loved ones. What complicates the matter is that there are 21 hospitals where survivors were taken, and it is very difficult to get through. I had some idea of what the Reaganhards have been going through when I decided earlier this evening to start calling around looking for Christian. And I ran into overloaded phone lines, or when I did get through to a hospital, I was put on hold indefinitely. I never did talk to anyone. To give you an update, there are still somewhere between 300 and 350 firefighters missing from New York. And I don't want to forget the police officers. There are an estimated 40 New York police officers missing. For 48 hours, I'm Erin Moriarty, CBS News.
The Attorney General of the United States, John Ashcroft, revealed that there were 18 hijackers aboard the suicide planes. I talked with the Attorney General earlier this evening. Now from Washington is the Attorney General of the United States, John Ashcroft. General Ashcroft, thank you for taking time to talk to us. In your opinion, what is the most important thing, the most important news you have for us at this moment?
Well, that the investigation is perhaps the broadest investigation in history, and that it's moving forward, that we're isolating on the individuals, learning about the individuals that were involved, developing leads in regard to associates, those who may well have participated with them.
Are any additional attacks imminent? Do you have any indication that other efforts are underway for additional attacks?
We have no indication that there are additional attacks imminent, but we are on an elevated
effort to make sure that our airlines are secure. And of course, on the day of this occurrence, the 11th, we asked individuals who were responsible for main infrastructural components of the country, both in the private and public sectors, to be on a state of heightened alert. A free society like ours obviously has to be vigilant to avoid disruption by those who would try to deprive us of that freedom. I don't think there's a reason for America not to be America, and we're not going to let that happen, but we've asked that people be careful. And obviously, when we assigned several hundreds of other officials to safeguard the airports and the air transportation system out of the U.S. Marshals Service, the U.S. Border Patrol, the Treasury Department's Customs Service, this is all designed not just to make air travel safe again, but to assure the public that we're going to be able to have the kind of air transportation system that provides and supports the freedom which Americans deserve.
General Ashcroft, it is true, is it not, that we have now asked Pakistan to close its border with Afghanistan, seal it tight, and allow us to overfly Pakistan?
Well, I'm not prepared or in a position to make announcements. We will welcome the cooperation by all kinds of countries. You know, various countries lost citizens in the World Trade Center. In almost an irony, this wasn't the American Trade Center, it was known as the World Trade Center. So citizens from Britain, Australia, Japan, Korea, Germany, these countries all lost lives here in this assault on humanity. And I believe we have a right to ask countries around the globe to participate with us. Our president has said very clearly we want to be the leaders in a victory for the world. And it would indeed be a victory for the kind of peace that the world craves if we were able together to work to root out this kind of senseless and vicious terrorism.
General Ashcroft, your predecessor and the previous FBI director were very critical of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Pakistan for not giving full cooperation in trying to track down terrorists such as those that blew a hole in the USS Cole. Is there any indication that you are in the process of changing that?
Well, I believe that so far the world has understood, as a result of the magnitude and nature of this savage attack on human dignity and on civilization, as well as on America as a country, that this vulnerability is a vulnerability of every nation, and that there is good reason to unite, to work together, to make sure that this is not allowed.
General Ashcroft, you said that there are 18 known killers on the various planes, but how many people involved in this country in this operation? I've heard 50, I've heard 40. Do we know how many were involved?
I think it would be improvident to try and speak a specific number. We are working diligently in regard to literally thousands of leads regarding potential associates and certainly anyone who might have been an accomplice. From the nature of these acts, it's clear that they were coordinated, and it's hard to believe that there wasn't some level of ground support and cooperation by individuals in assisting them. It is stunning to know that these pilots, a number of them were trained in the United States of America, and we are working very carefully to try and make sure that we understand what kind of people receive training and for what purposes.
General Ashcroft, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
By way of update, here are some of the more important headlines of the morning and the late evening. Congress and the White House have agreed on a $40 billion package to pay for fighting terrorism and recovery from the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. The FBI now holds a man who tried to board a flight to California from New York's JFK airport using a fake pilot's ID. There are indications this man might be connected to Tuesday's attacks. Defense officials are planning what they say will be a sustained military campaign against the terrorists behind the attacks. The Defense Department has asked the president for permission to call up between 30 and 50,000 military reserve troops. The search for victims goes on through the night in the rubble of Lower Manhattan and at the Pentagon. Hope fades of finding anybody alive at the World Trade Center. None are expected to be found alive now at the Pentagon. And President Bush will visit the disaster site in New York City on Friday. He has designated Friday a day for national prayer and remembrance. Secretary of State Colin Powell has named wealthy Saudi exile Osama bin Laden as, quote, a prime suspect in this week's attacks. But what to do about it? We take you to Mark Phillips at our bureau in London.
Little by little, in symbol and in fact, the groundwork for the retaliation for Tuesday's attacks is being laid. Today's changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace, with its unprecedented playing of the Star-Spangled Banner, was the symbolic expression of the international effort that is being discussed. Just as the laying of flowers at the U.S. Embassy in London is an expression